Hi, Helena.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here. I'm so excited. We were just talking about how I've taken a little bit of like a break over the summer to, get a little bit of space and time with the kids. So I'm like amped and I'm ready to be back and in these conversations. And when I woke up this morning and I realized it was you, I was like, oh, this is going to be so much fun.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I know we had such an instant connection when we first chatted, so I'm
Yes.
very excited to be bringing it back for the
Yes.
listeners.
Perfect energy. So I reached out to Helena after seeing some of what she'd been sharing online. And funnily enough, we were just talking about online platforms and social media and kind of where we're showing up and why. And I found her because I saw what she was putting out on LinkedIn. And I just found so much of what she was sharing to be compelling. I kind of watched as she was evolving some of her own way of talking about the work and what she's doing. And I was just really interested and how intentional she was being, and not only in her process, but also in what she was sharing. So when I reached out to her and we chatted, she is just as wonderful as I had imagined. Super fun, super candid, and I know this can sound a little trite, but really wise beyond her years. She has such a presence about her in such a short amount of time that we've had together. So I can't wait to dig in a little bit more. And I'm so excited for folks to meet you. So thanks for being here.
Yay, that was so kind, and thank you
Of
so much. And
course.
I mean, I would love to dig in on more of that, but I've only started really posting on LinkedIn this year, like
That's
only the
amazing.
last 4 months. So the fact that you found me and like it resonated is just, the proof is in the pudding. So it's very cool.
Totally. I know, especially as we can tell ourselves as we were just talking about how business owners and entrepreneurs are becoming brand creators in some ways.
Yeah.
Like there are mornings or days or weeks where you're like, I don't want to do that.
No.
I don't want to deal with
Don't make
that.
me post another thing this week.
Yeah. This is not what I thought I was signing up for.
Yes, exactly.
So I think for you, it would be really helpful if we start with the present day. So
Sure.
talk a little bit about what you've been building, a new company and something that's getting a lot of traction really early days. So let's start with today. What are you building and what are you excited about?
Yeah, great question. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Archive Digital, and we are a enterprise e-commerce services partner. So basically what that means is we implement e-commerce technologies. So we can do some work like strategy, design, agnostic, but then when it comes to the more technical side, we're working specifically with platform technologies. Think your Salesforce Commerce Cloud, Shopify. I work with a newer platform called Scale, which is entering the US market, which is really cool and exciting. So that's a little on like the nerdier side. You kind of need to understand like the e-commerce platform technology landscape. But bottom line is we are an e-commerce technology services provider, systems integrator, sometimes called, and then sometimes called agency. So all kind of interchangeable from
Okay.
that perspective. How I got here was I spent the majority of my career, so the last decade plus, in boutique agencies doing the exact same thing that Archive does today. And I was acquired by big, big companies. So I went through an acquisition to Capgemini, which is like a global systems integrator. And then I also went through an acquisition to WPP, which is like one of the biggest creative holding companies in the world. So had rode the corporate career through two big acquisitions, and then really just identified an opportunity in the market to bring a true boutique commerce enterprise commerce services company back to the market, kind of the type of company that I grew up in and came up in my career in. And then we're female founded, which is really unusual in this space. So I'm, super proud of that.
I did not know about the navigation of the acquisition landscape. I mean, that's such
Yeah.
a unique experience. So I definitely want to hear a little bit about that. But before we go there, who are you working with? Like, who are the types? Is it like a size of a business? Is it at a stage of a business? Like, who's finding you?
Honestly, we say enterprise, so think like your big branded manufacturers and retailers.
Mm-hmm.
So, like household name companies,
Okay.
companies that people want to work with. Like these aren't clients that we work with today, but clients that I've worked with in my past are like Herman Miller and Design Within Reach, Yeti Coolers, Kate Spade, Stuart Weitzman, Tory Burch, Coach. Like think big branded manufacturers and retailers that are selling online.
So I would love to hear a little bit about maybe how, when you walked through that acquisition landscape, like how similar were each of those experiences, right, with each other? And, kind of what have you taken from that as you think about what you're building today and kind of maybe
Sure.
what your hope is for the future with Archive?
Yeah, for sure. So they were similar, but pretty different
Mm,
experiences, actually. And I also think it really matters where you're at in your career when you go through an acquisition. So, for example, the first acquisition I went through was in 2018, and I was an individual contributor. So, I was
mhm.
an account manager, I was managing a book of business, and you're kind of just an employee. So you're
Yeah.
like, company's getting acquired, your email's gonna change, some
Yeah.
things are gonna change, but like you've got more leadership level people kind of protecting you and the
Mhm.
rest of the company from any of the negative, I don't want to say like negative, but like some of just like the bigger change
It
that
can be a little
comes.
dramatic at times.
Yes,
Yeah, there's like
exactly.
some stuff there that can be,
So
yeah.
I was younger in my career. I was an individual contributor. So I just had a different perspective of
Mm,
things, right? Like, on one hand, it was like, oh, cool, we can sell more services to our clients. So more opportunity for me. Like, there was some of that. But then as the years kind of go on, you start to notice what I always say, like, I'm not really a big company person. So I'm kind of saying this like in jest, but also very seriously, is like just the bureaucracy that
yeah.
comes with it.
Yeah.
Like the layers of management, the red tape, like just the bigger the company gets, the more there is to navigate.
Hmm.
And I was an account manager. So my job was to manage our clients and make sure they were getting the best service they possibly could from us. And it happened, I started really noticing that I couldn't do the same things for
Mm,
clients that I was able to do when we were more of a boutique agency. So I mean, there's so many different examples of that, but like things just take longer. You can't turn around contracts as quickly. You're having to reset expectations. Like there just becomes more layers between the client and the decision making, which I was kind of in the middle of. So that was really what colored that experience for me. Fast forward to the next acquisition I went through, I started at that company when they were on a very high growth trajectory, and I came in as our head of account management. So I was leading the function, and then I ended up moving into being the chief of staff to our CEO through the acquisition. And when we got acquired by that company, like I was the chief of staff to the CEO. So I
mhm.
was absolutely at the leadership level, seeing everything that was going on behind the scenes, not behind the scenes, like just a wholly different experience because I was in those meetings. I was in conversations around layoffs and cost cutting. And this was in that acquisition happened. The second acquisition happened in like the 2023 timeframe, 2024 timeframe, which is when the economy really started taking a
Mhm.
turn. And we're in digital and retail. So
Yeah.
there was a boom in 2020, 2021, 2022 through the COVID times.
Hmm.
So like there
Yeah.
was a ton of digital spending. It was like we always joke, we're like those were the golden years of e-commerce. Like things were
Hmm.
so good that everyone was really riding a high, and then come 2023, 2024, the market really shifted.
Mm.
So kind of add that on top of I was on the leadership team. I was seeing a lot more that I didn't see the first time around. I was having to make harder decisions, and the economy it was just in a completely different place than
Yeah.
it was in the first time around. So my personal experience was fairly different, but the the environment is a lot the same. Like the
Sure.
bureaucracy, the decision making, like things taking longer. You're running a major acquisition into a global company. You're navigating all of that. So
Mm,
kind of fast forward, it's really those two experiences and getting further and further away from the customer. Like I always say, I was raised in the industry with a customer first
mhm.
mentality. And I also we're in the services business, like consulting and services. Like I always say, your integrity, your reputation, your word, it's like that's all we have. Like we're not
Yeah.
selling a product. We're not. So being a services company, being able to do what you say you're going to do carries a lot of weight and is very important. So when you get put in a position where you can't do that as well as you used to be able to, clients notice.
Totally.
And that's what really drove me to want to start Archive and want to do my own thing, because I had been through it twice and I was just like, there's a better way. Like,
Yeah.
we can get back to the customer. We can get back to just doing great work with great people. It doesn't have
Hmm.
to be complicated.
Totally. I love that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be so serious, right? Like I feel
Exactly.
like
Yeah. Yeah. As my younger sister reminds me, it's just not that deep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes. I remember I had a really dear friend who was really high up on the creative team at Gap,
Oh,
and like his
yeah.
boss was like, you know, just running the show. And like he said, he asked him one time, like, how do you keep it so chill? Like, how are you not like stressed all the time or like freaked out or whatever? And he said his answer was, at the end of the day, it's just t-shirt and jeans. It's just
That
t-shirts and jeans. Like,
I
that's
just
it.
got I just got chills because one of the first stories I heard in my career from my then boss at the time, we had a client a couple agencies ago who was like, same thing, a timeline slipping, a project's going off the rail, whatever. It's just chaotic. And he's like, we're selling overpriced t-shirts to
Yeah.
guys who do not need another t-shirt. Like,
Yeah.
we're not going to the moon, we're not curing cancer. Like, it's just not that big of a deal. So that
Yes.
is definitely like a thing in retail. Yeah.
I love it. Yes, I come back to it. Like even, I mean, because it translates so well to every industry, right? Like when I can
Totally.
remember for myself, like it's just t-shirts and jeans. Like everything's fine, and we're gonna
Everything's
get through
fine.
whatever this, next little bump is.
Yeah.
I was curious when you were talking about the gap in the market, and I hear you saying like you can just see that there was an opportunity to be more directly connected with the client and stay smaller. Did you, or maybe not smaller, that's not the right language, but just having that kind of more boutique feeling around
Yeah.
what it means to come back to being client first? Did you, like, could you have seen yourself as an entrepreneur years ago? Like, is this something you'd
Oh.
always hoped for yourself? Or is this kind of just a moment in time that you took advantage of?
Honestly, a little bit of all of the above in kind of a
Okay.
weird way. Obviously, in hindsight, you're able to kind of track the moments or the things. But if you
Yeah.
had asked me when I was working at that first agency if I was going to start my own thing, I would have told you absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like I've kind of always had this drive or this fire within me of like, I was going to lead something.
Yeah.
But to me, I was like, oh, that could be like a high level at a corporate company, or that, like, I just never, it was never like, oh, I'm definitely going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I do, in hindsight, like look back, and every single move I've made has led me to exactly where I am. So I think it like all kind of lined up perfectly to
Yeah.
put me here. And I always wanted to lead, wanted to have a big impact. That has definitely always been true. Almost to the point where when I was thinking about what I was going to do next, leaving the last acquisition in like winter of 2024 into the beginning of 2025, I I've tried to leave corporate so many times. Like, oh, I'm just going to go do my own thing. Like, maybe I'll do coaching or do what, whatever. Like, kind of, I've always had these fantasies like, oh, I'm going to leave and I'm going to do my own thing. And then the opportunity to start Archive came up. And it was like about the third time in my career where I tried to leave and I've been like pulled back in. And that's when I finally was just like, oh, clearly I am meant to lead as a woman
Mm.
in this like more corporate male tech world. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have a great like reason or anything, but like I do feel like the signs have led me where I'm like, oh, this is, you're where you're supposed to be, and like we prepared you for this.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. It's always that like the wisdom that comes with the ability to look back, right? None of us can necessarily predict unless you have a very clear linear path for yourself and
Yeah.
right, you want to be a surgeon or you want to be, in
Sure.
some kind of law. But I think for the majority of us, it's really in the being able to look at those kind of mile markers and connect the dots. And sometimes it takes years and sometimes, it can be, and of
Yeah.
course it always evolves, but it's such a great way, I think, of getting to know ourselves as we're moving into the next season to be able to go, okay, wait, I'm starting to see how everything's stacking up in a way to bring me
Yeah.
where I'm going. But
I'm definitely somebody, and I can kind of see this more clearly now, where like I'm like wired to look for the opportunity, and I've definitely
mm,
raised my hand for things like before I was ready. So
mm,
that has
yeah,
been true throughout, like going
Yeah.
all the way back to like I started in this industry as an inside sales rep. Like I always joke, like the worst job ever, like just dialing the phones, gritting your teeth and smiling and dialing, like so
Yeah.
hard,
Yeah.
but builds so much character. And
Yes.
I pretty much begged our head of account management at the time to hire me onto her team, which would have been like, it was essentially like a skip level. I had never done the job before. I was like, please, I can do it. Like, I know I can do this job. And like, she took a bet on me. And if I had never, some of those clients I managed as an individual account manager at that job are my clients today at my agency.
Oh, that's
So like, it
amazing.
just,
Yeah.
again, like
Yeah.
raising your hand before you're ready, looking for the opportunity. Like those are all things that are true about me that I know have led me.
This is a bit of a random question, so go with me here. And I
Can't
ask
wait.
because you mentioned being a chief of staff, and I also was a chief of staff for, a while, and I get the question a lot, and I find it so interesting of like, should should they go for that role? Like people are really curious about what that title even entails. And I always tell
Yeah.
people like, well, first of all, it depends on the company. And it really depends on like, right, you can be the chief of staff to the CEO, you can be the chief of staff to the entire executive team, you can be the chief of staff to the entire company, right? Like there's so many different ways to like
Yep.
chop it up. But I do always, my only advice to people if they're considering that path is be really clear and intentional about what you think that title means and like
Yeah.
work in collaboration around because I held it
100%.
in two different companies and they were vastly different experiences.
Yeah.
So for anybody that might be thinking about that trajectory for their career or interested in that title, any advice or like what you would share about your own experience that might
Yeah.
help?
I love this question because it's this the chief of staff is like a very, what's the word? Like, I don't want to say ambiguous, but like mystical.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
it's just different everywhere, which to your point,
Totally.
I've only done it in one situation. So you having done it in two different situations, like even speaks to that more.
Yeah.
But the first thing I'll say is it's my favorite job I've ever had. Like
Ditto. I know.
I think a couple things. One, I think you really need to know yourself. Like you need to have
Yes.
a really clear understanding of like yourself, your strengths, your gaps,
Mm,
because the ambiguity can be really hard for a lot of people. You
totally.
have to be able to absorb and manage like a high level of ambiguity and a high level of chaos, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably true
No
across
matter what.
no
Totally.
matter what.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is like, I think you really need to get to know your principal. So like the
Mm-hmm.
person you're supporting, obviously that could be multiple people. It could be a chief revenue officer. It could be a CEO. It could be at a small startup. It could be in a large global company. Again, that can look a lot of different ways, but I actually think, at least in my situation, I worked for my CEO as our head of account management before I became his chief of staff. So
Yeah.
we already had a
Knew each
working
other.
rapport, a
Yeah.
working relationship that it made a lot of sense for me to take on
Yeah.
that role. But I think you really need to know that person and what you're getting into because
Totally.
you're usually doing more than just what the job requires.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
100%. I called myself in my first iteration. I was like his translator. That's what
A
it felt
hundred
like.
percent.
Like it was like I am taking your chaos and trying to
Making it
wrangle
like
it in a
actionable.
way.
Yeah.
Yes, and also be able to literally be able to speak to it in a way that other folks like our board chair, he'd be like, "Okay, tell me
Yeah.
what we're actually doing." And I'd be like, "Okay,
Yeah.
let's break it down," right?
And I mean, I think the thing that like doesn't really get talked about is like you absorb a lot. So like your
Yes.
emotional center like
Mm,
has to be pretty clear and you have to be able to separate like what's yours versus what somebody else's. And like that's not a skill that like a 22-year-old out of college has necessarily.
totally. Yeah.
So I think there's like a lot of cultivation around that. The last thing I'll say on the chief of staff topic is I'm actually in this like women in retail think tank for
Mm,
AI. Like it's really interesting. But the reason I bring it up is the whole think tank's objective is to like track and see signals before the market catches up.
mm,
And something that we are seeing already through the data and the research that across all these different people we have engaged across we're specifically looking at retail, but it's like retail and technology, is the chief of staff role is becoming even more important with AI.
Oh,
because
interesting.
companies need like these integrators and
Oh,
things are so
interesting.
much more cross functional.
Yeah,
So there's really an opportunity for chiefs of staffs to rise into taking on like a higher level organizational role because AI is just disrupting so much of how work gets done.
that's so fascinating. And I
Yeah.
think it's so real. One of my clients right now, they just like grew gangbusters over like 5 years. And so trying to like help them navigate this current moment as they look to the next 5 years to make sure, right, that like things are kind of pulled together in a way that will set them up for success. And we were just talking yesterday and I said, you're missing that kind of like layer of glue and exactly what you're saying, that kind of
Yeah.
like the integrator and the way to kind of like make sure, right, the change management side of the house, that takes such an intentional amount of energy.
Yeah.
And so many folks at the leadership level, frankly, don't have that kind of time. And so to have somebody that can actually hold so much of that is really
Yeah.
tricky because it's also the person that's thinking strategically and is organized, right? There's so many
There's
different
so much.
components to it.
And
Yeah.
I think women are really well suited for it
Mm,
specifically. And I do think there's like a like when you have a male, like I was in a CEO dynamic, but like when you have a male CEO and then like a female chief of staff behind them, like I actually really think that's a magical combination because
hmm,
you're getting like we all have masculine and feminine qualities, right? And sometimes we
sure,
over index one versus the other, but like I think it really balances like
sure.
just the leadership of an organization because you've kind of got somebody like bringing in the people perspective, bringing in the, managing like a big part of what I did was like the other leaders would like call me and be
Mm,
able to like vent about theirs. So then you're kind of like bringing that in and like filtering up what matters. And I just think there's a really magical thing that happens when you have a balance of like the masculine and feminine
mm.
energies together.
As long as there's a balance, I will say, with one slight caveat, that mine turned into a not great dynamic
Oh
because
gosh.
there are, for all the reasons around, and none of it was like nefarious or ill-intentioned, but I think because your point was so great around knowing yourself, because I think at that stage of my career I didn't totally know how to like own my own space, and so that can also be really tricky. That can be tricky for anybody,
Absolutely.
gender,
Yeah.
regardless. But I think there are moments that I look back on and go, oh wow, I really like let myself get molded in ways that were not actually setting me up for
Yeah.
success. And so it's an interesting, I feel like we could probably do a part two
Yeah.
of
I
this.
love the chief of staff topic. So you went
There's
there.
so much to talk about. I know, because it really is fun though. I mean, I went from, in my last chief of staff role, I then moved into the COO role, which, on paper is the coolest thing. And it was great. And I'm so grateful for that experience. But ultimately, the chief of staff role was so much more fun. I mean, it was like so much
Oh
more
yeah.
exciting and like so much, it was just so dynamic. And there was
Yeah.
something new every single day. And I went from, with the chief of staff role, so many times you're like, have your hands in the like dirt of the thing. Whereas
Yeah.
by the time I shifted out of that and I was really just managing teams for the most part and managing departments, I was like, oh, I'm not doing anything anymore.
Yeah. Right. This isn't fun
Like,
anymore. Yeah. No, my favorite job I've ever had still.
I'm curious for you, like, it's also a really interesting moment because you're really close to the transition from going, chief of staff, executive level, corporate, to building your own business. And so many of the women that I work with and talk to are kind of like navigating that moment where they're asking themselves, like, maybe not even asking themselves, they're giving themselves permission to say, you know what? I don't think I want to be on this corporate track anymore. I've spent, 20, 30 years building my career, but I don't see this being what I want to do forever. I think there's something in me that like is ready to build on my own, or I'm ready to like, have a different lifestyle because this corporate, stuff, all the bureaucracy you were talking about earlier,
Sure.
for whatever reason, they are looking at the next season of their life a little differently. And, I'm working with one client right now who is going to make the transition. And so we're working through the planning for that. But when you think about that transition for yourself, like, what was the hardest part about going from, having a very clearly, even though the chief of staff role is not clearly defined, as we
Yeah.
just shared, but you do still have goals and deliverables, and like, right, kind of what's
For sure.
expected of you. So yeah, how was that transition for you? And what do you think was the most challenging piece of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I haven't really thought about it from that perspective before. The first thing that kind of pops into my head is like you just have to have a very high level of like accountability and responsibility. Like
Mm,
there's nobody, you don't really have anybody to answer to. I do have a board, so like I
hmm.
technically have somebody to answer to, but like day to day, there's nobody like telling me what needs to be done. You know what I mean? Like you have to really like own your time and own your, sales and delivery and operations and finances and whatever the thing may be. And there's tons of different types of businesses. And like me growing and scaling an agency is a little bit different than if somebody's going to start their own consulting. And that's kind of a different business model. So it's,
Hmm.
there's nuances there to that. But I think like, again, it kind of goes back to like knowing yourself and really
Totally.
knowing like, do you have like what it takes? And like when it's really hard, can you keep going? I think is like
Totally.
the biggest thing. Like when you don't really have anybody, I think the one of the biggest things in a corporate environment that I mean, I don't know, maybe it gets talked about. I haven't really talked about it before, but it's like you always have somebody to like rub up against. Whether
Totally.
it's like
Yeah.
your peers, your team, your boss, your like director, what, there's always like somebody to like pressure test and help like, and there's lines, and like when you start your own thing, like
Yeah.
no,
You,
like it's
yeah.
you and you, and
Yeah.
then you might eventually grow your team and bring in
But even
fractional
still,
consultant.
the book stop
Yes,
or it stops at you no matter what,
the
even if you build a team, right?
exactly. And I
Yeah.
think again, you kind of have to, and I think you get made throughout the
Hmm.
process. Like it's not either like you have it or you don't. I think so much of the journey is like you go on the journey and you find out what you're made of. Like
Totally.
we were saying, like Rome is not built in a day, and like can you keep the faith when you feel like it doesn't look like anything's happening? And like that's where I think that's what really it comes down to. I think for just going specifically for me on that topic, I think we talked about this when we first talked, but I've been sober for 10 years, and that's a huge part of my like personal journey, personal story, and happy to talk about that too. But like for me, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. So like starting a bit like
You're like,
even
I
before,
got this. Yeah.
yeah, and not
Yeah.
to sound like
No, I get what you're saying. Yes.
inflated or whatever, but it's like that was literally the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yes.
And the amount of like personal responsibility, dedication, self-control, like standards, like so much has gone into that like I was like I can do, I'll be able to do
Yes. You're
this.
like, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think you're so right. And I do have that on my list of things to talk about because, part of that to me also, it taps a bit into this idea around female intuition that we've talked about and that you've talked about. So I'm going to park that for 1 second because I think the important piece that you're touching on is something we had talked about earlier as well, which is, the best things typically, and it sounds again so cliche, but like they truly do take the time. It takes time to do this. It's the
Yeah.
same with the friendship, it's the same with the business. Like you want to see those things through. I feel like we live in a culture where it's like so easy to say, oh, we had a disagreement, we're cutting that off, like, or
Yep.
that's toxic or whatever. And I certainly am not advocating for like staying in any kind of toxic or abusive
Of
relationship, but
course.
I think so much of the storyline more and more is like, oh, toxic, I'm done, like you're
You're like,
now
oh, that's
here.
not for me. Like, I don't like that. I'm out. And it's like,
Yes,
well,
yes. Same with,
preference.
it's like if you're gonna jump ship as soon as you think it feels a little icky, then it's gonna be a long road because
Yeah.
really you cannot see what it's gonna be until you've taken the time. And in the same way that you've shared too, you let your client tell you what the business is gonna be in some ways. You don't
Yep.
know necessarily until you're out there trying it. And so the real beauty of it comes after, a few years, a few seasons, and when you can start to see that pattern emerge.
Yep.
And I guess I'm just coming into this realization for myself that I'm now talking about this and even differently for myself, where it's like, no, this is an intentional way of living. It's not just like
Yes.
about the business. And, some of my dearest friendships are ones that we've had some hard stuff, but we've
Of
had the
course.
hard conversations and we've dealt with it. And now that then shapes and molds that relationship in a way where we trust each other. And I
Yep.
think the same with the business. You now get to trust your business because you've done the hard stuff.
Yep.
So it's a little woo woo, but I think it's,
Totally.
I am this kind of theme around knowing yourself, female intuition, right? You have shared with me, how having an all male board also means you have to really sit with things for yourself and make sure that you're checking in with yourself instead of just like blindly following
Yeah.
advice or directives. You shared with me how in your first board meeting after raising money, you reversed the company's like planned kind of partner tech direction with zero data, just your intuition,
Yeah.
and told the board that. And I imagine that there is something there too around the sobriety piece and what it means to have to sit with yourself. So this is a really big question.
Oh, I love it. I think it's great.
But maybe, yeah, share a little bit about what that's looked like for you and how you now think about what it means to be honing your own, intuition as you lead a company, over the next however, long the season is with Archive.
Yeah. No, it's such a good question. I mean, I'm kind of even stuck on like what you were just sharing about with the like the business and the friendship. And like for me, like the parallels of building a business and then like building I was 10 years sober in May, so it's been a decade. And
Congratulations.
thank you. But it's like the parallels are just so strong.
Mm.
And now I'm thinking I write a lot on Substack about this, and I'm like, I feel like there's like a whole piece here about this. So
Oh, I love
I'm gonna
it.
have to like circle back to
Yes.
this. But there's just so many parallels in like even to just use an example, like I didn't really feel confident in my sobriety until like year 4. Like,
Mm.
and so when you think about a business, it's like, okay, you might be getting some deals and like moving things along, but it's like, when do you really feel like you have a business? Like, is
Right,
it year 3?
right.
Is it year 4? Is it year 10? Is it like, and that's a whole different conversation around like what constitutes success and like how, but like just this idea of like, you don't feel ready. Like you
Yeah.
don't feel, I mean, there was early days of sobriety where I was, I was in my mid 20s. I was getting invited to weddings, getting invited to go out with college friends. I lived in Chicago at the time, and like I was showing up and I was like miserable inside because
Yeah.
I was like, this is so not me. Like I don't even know how to act. Like I'm not the same person. Like who am I without alcohol? Like just the imposter syndrome around that. And it's like, okay, fast forward 10 years. I'm
Mm.
sitting in a client pitch or whatever. It's a chief technology officer, a chief digital officer of like a global company. And I'm like, who am I to be here? Like the
Yeah.
imposter syndrome.
So
Like
it's back.
it's
Yeah.
like the parallels are just so similar. And that's just one example. I'm sure I could come up with 10 more.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like so much of sobriety is like learning to sit with the uncomfortable feeling anyway
Totally.
and like
Yeah.
not numb it. And
Mm.
like, can I sit with the anxiety or sit with the mean comment a family member makes at Thanksgiving, but then show up the next morning in relationship with them because that's what you do when you
Mm.
learn to work through your feelings and take responsibility and not just assume everyone's out to get you or whatever. We all have our like cha-cha or whatever we think about the world or our families. Like I'm sure everybody has a version of that,
Yeah.
but so much of sobriety is like building that muscle and building that capacity, and like it's the exact same in the business. Like
Hmm.
you have to build the capacity to like have the hard conversations, have a disagreement with a board member or an employee and show up the next day and work with that person. Like it's just the I again, I didn't know at the time that the
Mm.
translation that like it was preparing me for this, but like
Mm.
here we are, and I'm so grateful. And it did not happen overnight. It's been 10 long years of like
Yes.
earning the happiness and like earning the joy and earning all the stuff that comes after you kind of excavate and clear yourself out and like realize, at least in my case, like what I'm really made of outside of just
Totally.
being somebody who like used alcohol to have a good time and like numb my
Mm.
feelings.
Yes, it reminds me of my very favorite leader that I worked for led us through the company through, COVID years and early days. Actually, maybe it was like even during the insurrection, there was like a moment in time when like everything felt like the world was like
The
on
world is
fire
falling
and
apart.
everybody was like, whoa, like, and
Yes.
we worked for like a very progressive leaning company, right? So like people were really feeling it at the moment.
Yeah.
And I remember she brought us all together. I think there was like 800 of us at that point on staff.
Oh,
And so we would do these like weekly town halls just to kind of keep people, connected during a time when everyone felt so disconnected. And she said, and she's like she's such an interesting thinker in general, but she had shared, we were all building a muscle you don't even know you need yet. And it was
Yeah.
such, I think about that all the time and how it is so true that I now look back at those years and go, oh my gosh, so much of what built for the foundation that I'm at today,
Yep.
I actually don't think I could do had I not gone through some of those
Yep.
harder experiences. And then same thing when that same company imploded 3 years ago and everything fell apart and blew up in our face. Like that was yet another thing that at the time felt almost insurmountable just because of the nuance. And that's a whole other layered conversation for another time. But again, I now look at that and go, okay, wouldn't be the version of myself today if it
Yeah.
weren't for that. And so, how you keep going through those and not becoming angry and bitter and like frustrated, right? We all go through those feelings, but to
Of
not like
course.
hold on to it and let it
Yeah.
like shape us and mold us and actually find our way through it. I think, I would imagine a journey of sobriety has some similar moments of going, okay, I just have to trust myself
Yeah.
and
A
trust.
100%. Like, yes. And I also think it's like you, it's a choice. Like that perspective you just shared is a choice.
Yeah.
Being like, oh, this thing was really hard, but I'm through it. And I'm choosing to see that as something that contributed positively to like where I'm at today that I can build on. And like, because of that, I now have this capacity and can navigate. Like, I don't think everybody chooses that. I think some
No.
people do
Yeah.
choose to like wallow in or be like, oh, this has been so hard for me or whatever. And like, again, sobriety really builds a strong muscle of personal responsibility. So, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like you chose your life and you chose this. So, like, you are the only person that can get you out of it. So, that has
Hmm.
definitely like colored my worldview a little bit. But like, I think it's a choice. And I
Yeah.
think when you choose even like future facing to associate positively with those previously like negative experiences, like it just makes
Yeah.
everything easier.
Yeah. Yes. Is there anything um that you found out about yourself like early years of sobriety that you thought was either surprising or that you were like, "Oh, hey, that's interesting. I didn't know that about myself," or like anything that kind of you unearthed that you thought was,
I it's
interesting?
it's a great question. I was so young.
Mhm.
Like I was 23 when I quit
Yeah.
drinking.
Yeah.
So like I kind of joke like I was like a teenage alcoholic is what I
Yeah.
like was kind of my joke, which was like terrible. But
Yeah.
I, like your 20s are such a intense period of like finding yourself anyway. I think for
Totally.
anybody, like drinking or not
Yes.
drinking. Like so
Yes.
I have this I used to lead like a lot of sober like women's groups in my 20s when I was in Chicago, and something we talked about a lot was like nobody tells you how hard your 20s are. Like
Mm.
nobody prepares you for like moving to a city, potentially starting a job. It's like you're with friends, but then some people start seriously dating. So like that becomes a thing and people start pairing off. And then you've got some friends that are getting married. You've got friends that aren't even thinking about like there's just a lot you're trying to get promoted or excel in your career. Like there's just so much happening in that
Yeah.
decade. So I think it's a period of like navigating no matter what. I think for me, like it was really about finding out who I was without alcohol. Like
Yeah.
a lot of my life and my social life revolved around drinking. So like learning to have fun at things that I previously would drink at was like a
Mm.
big unlock for me. And now I'm like, I can do anything. Like
Yeah.
I can do anything. I will go anywhere. Like we have a trade show in Vegas. Like you'll find me out at the club. Like I will go anywhere. There's like nothing off limits. Like
Yeah.
I still love. I think like the biggest thing would be like I still love to go out and have a good time. Like
Yeah.
enjoy a
Yeah.
concert, enjoy a show. Like I like just because drinking wasn't the only reason I liked those things.
That's an interesting revelation. Sure. Yes. I think because sometimes we don't even consider that,
Right.
right? Like it's not something we're thinking about consciously when we're engaging with the world in that way. It's like it's just a product of that experience in so many
Yep.
ways, right? Not for everyone, obviously, but like
Yeah.
for so many folks. And
And I'm
so,
definitely an extroverted person in general. So like
yeah,
kind of just coming back to center around that and being like, oh, this is actually just who I
who
am.
I
Like
am.
at my
Oh,
core. Yeah.
yeah. I love that. Has your idea of success evolved over the years?
I mean, I definitely entered the job market out of college, like thinking like, oh, you just climb the corporate ladder. And like, I came from a family where like my dad worked at the same company for 40 years. Like, that's
Hmm.
just what you do, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of like bouncing around, going like running towards the next opportunity, becoming an entrepreneur, like, yeah, I think it's all there. It's all been success in my
Hmm.
mind in one way or another. And I don't even know what the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years of that like will look like. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a optimistic leaning person. So I'm
Yeah.
very like, I'm open to see what comes and
I
what
love
it
that.
looks like.
Yes, I love that so much. I think I ask that question because I think I keep calling it the like you're still, younger in your
Yes.
path, but there's, some of us that are in, let's say, women of a certain age, we like to call ourselves, right? Like mid 40s to mid 50s, where there's almost this, not for everyone, again, I'm not trying to blanket statement anything, but thematically it does feel like there's a bit of like almost a reckoning happening
There
around,
is. Yeah.
okay, wait a second, like
Yeah.
I did all this shit and I built this thing, or I like have given my body and soul to this company, and like also my body and soul to raising a family, or building a community, like whatever that looks like for you. And waking up and going, wait a second, like is this
I will say,
really
like,
what I wanted?
I definitely had that moment. So
Mm,
in winter of 2024, going into like January of 2025, right before Archive like became an idea that we brought to the world, I was at one of the WPP agencies that we had been acquired into. I had a very good job. I was high up. I was like 2 levels below the global CEO. I was what I kind of would explain to my friends. Like, I was very much in like a golden handcuff situation. Like, I was
totally.
like, I can stay here. I'm going to have like the best insurance. I can have a couple kids. I can take 3 to 6 months of maternity throughout the next decade a couple times if that's what I want. Again, with sobriety, with other things. Like, I'm not saying I like live an alternative lifestyle by any means, but like I've kind of been forced to think outside the box. Like getting
Yeah.
sober at 23 when like all your friends are drinking and partying every weekend, like I kind of be like, okay, my life is gonna look a little different, you know?
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
kind of had a capacity for that already, I would say.
Anyways, yeah.
And what it really came down to was I was just like, I will be so mad at myself if I don't try.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
I was like, if I look back 10, 20 years from now and I don't try going it on my own, like corporate will always be there. Like
Yes,
I can
yes,
always, like,
yeah,
that's just what I'm like, you can always go back. Like you can
yeah.
always go back. If you fail and go back, like I do not intend that to happen.
No, I know, but I
But
hear what you're saying. Yes, because I think that we tend to, two of my dearest friends are gonna move their family likely to either Lisbon or Spain next summer because they've been living in a community that's not working for them. And it's like a whole conversation that's happening. And there's this piece around what you think your life, especially,
yeah,
if you're moving in a certain direction and their kids are at the kind of like junior high, elementary school age. And so we can tell ourselves these things around, okay, well, I have to stay because of X, Y, and Z, or
yep,
like it has to look like this because this is the way it's been modeled for me over the years, or what I've seen. And I'm literally stealing this quote from something, and I don't know where it's from, but it's like we're all wild animals living in cages with the door wide open. And it's
yep,
like that is so that in the same way they're thinking differently about what their whole lifestyle might look
yep,
like. And it's like it doesn't have to look like you live in this space and it
yeah,
looks like this forever. And so what, to your point, if it in a year they're like, you know what? That was a terrible idea. Like, what were we thinking? Okay, fine. Then
yeah.
you move on to what's next, but you're still going to be informed by that decision. Whether
And that
it was,
experience. Yeah.
yes, whether it was a great experience or a not great experience, you're
Well, and
still going to be informed by
I
it.
always like to say too, like I feel very privileged for a couple of reasons. One, because I've been able to learn from like I always say like Gen X, like I'm a
Mm.
millennial. It's like I've been paying attention. Like I've been
Yeah.
watching. I've been able to learn a lot from the generation of women that have paved like from boomers and Gen X that have like paved the corporate world before me. So like I do feel like I've been able to kind of make some of these decisions on an accelerated timeline
Yeah.
because I've been able to learn from the women that have gone before me. And then the other thing on that is like I don't have kids right
Mm.
now. Like my husband does have a stable job. Like I was in a perfect life scenario to take a risk. And
Yeah.
I don't like take that for granted either. Like it just happened to be the way my life lined up in this particular moment to be able to say like, yes, I'm going to quit corporate and bet on
Yeah.
myself and take this chance because, you know, if I look back at my life, I'll regret if I don't. But a lot of things lined up for me to feel
Sure.
confident doing that.
Totally. But it's also in being able to pay attention to when those moments happen and being able to
Yes.
take advantage of it, right?
Yep.
So, yes, those things can be true, but it doesn't mean that you then were going to automatically take advantage of it
Yeah,
or be able
I
to
could
even
have
see
talked,
it.
if I thought about it a little too hard, I could have talked myself into the corporate benefits, golden
Oh,
handcuff, like
yeah.
nice,
No, I
stable
know.
career
Yes.
situation.
Which I'm
Yes.
also like, hey, everybody, nothing is stable or
It's all
guaranteed for
an
much
illusion.
longer.
I was just talking to someone about that last week. Like we're like, it's all an illusion. Like it's just an
Literally.
illusion of safety. Like
It
the
is.
corporate company is an illusion of safety.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur, like we're all,
All
it's
of
just
it.
an
There's
illusion of
no such thing.
safety.
Yes, but we are humans that need safety, and so I understand it,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so to actively put ourselves into, situations or whatever that feel risky, it goes against our literal nature. So I
Yes,
totally also get
absolutely.
that. At
Absolutely.
the risk of opening Pandora's box, I have two questions for you. One that I always end with, but one is around kind of your take on women and AI right now. And I'm
Okay.
interested in this
Yeah.
because we touched on this a little bit in our first chat. And there's that kind of like urgency versus caution gap, right? Like we talked about how if we don't want, if anyone's read the book Invisible Women and how so many things in our world have been built around data that is not related to women at all, and it's all based on, gender that has nothing to do with our own. I don't know this world. This is not something I am an expert in, but I do fear just a bit that we're going to have yet another example of a technology that's being built with, again, if men are the majority of the users of this technology at this moment, it's literally being created
Yep.
again with their data that they're feeding into
Yep.
it, their conversations that they're feeding into it. I also understand on the other side, right, how women are concerned about the environment. Not, it's not
Yep.
just a woman thing, right? But like I do hear that from a lot of my female clients around
Yep.
like, well, and so I'm not in the business of trying to convince anyone because it has to be a personal choice on how you decide how you're going to navigate, especially a technology that can disrupt industries, right? Like one of my nearest and dearest is one of the most creative, one of the most talented, one of the most like unbelievably incredible designers that you could ever meet, right? And so there's a lot of stuff around industries that are going to be, looking at what does this mean for my own personal contribution. So there's so much nuance here. I'm not trying to like strip it down to black and white, but I do still think underneath all of that is my like, but ladies, we gotta like be part of shaping what is inevitably happening, regardless of how we feel about it. And so I'm curious just kind of what your
Yeah.
base level take is on that.
I mean, it is such Pandora's box. It's so nuanced. I'm by no means like a quantum large language model expert, right? Like this is not
But
a,
I think that's why we have to be talking about it because we
yeah.
don't want to leave it to just the ones
Yeah.
that do, right? Like, I think it's important that we're all fumbling around this a little bit and maybe saying things that in a few months we go, you know what? That's actually not my take anymore. That
So
has to be
yeah,
okay.
I very much fall in your camp. Like I've done
Mm,
videos on LinkedIn, I've done videos on Instagram. Like I am like in the camp of like women get on board or get left behind. Like the
mm,
train is leaving the station
mm,
and we have been left behind. Like .com boom, like so many things where like again, whether it was just because like, we didn't have as many women in the workplace, like you can go into all the reasons why necessarily, but like I firmly believe this is a pivotal moment in the way that we work, live, engage that will fundamentally change a lot of the way things are done going forward in my lifetime and, future generations' lifetime. And I think it is our responsibility as women to
mm,
engage. Like, I think we have to because we are the ones. I actually would take it even further. Like, I think women are innately suited to have an impact here
mm,
because there's so much data and there's so much like it can always be about the data, but like that doesn't translate into, it kind of goes back to like the chief of staff conversation. Like that doesn't translate into like how work gets done,
mm,
how organizations get designed. How do
mm,
we then talk about like disrupting organizational structures
Mm-hmm.
cross-functionally. Like that is where women, like we inherently live in the gaps. We
Mm.
live in the nuance. We live in the subtext. We pick up on the vibes and the feelings. Again, not to get like too woo-woo, but that's like where AI is gonna need, like I was actually again on this like think tank, and like we started talking about like people are saying like human in the loop, and we've started saying like human in the lead. And
Ooh.
that is like just so, I think, important. But and it's like, yeah, you can talk about the environment, you can talk about anything. And I say this again in jest, but I think it's very serious. It's like the guys aren't gonna slow down.
They're not worried
Like
about it.
we have enough proof over
Yeah.
hundreds of years to know when there is profit in sight
Yep.
and power, and it's like they're not slowing down.
So
So then
how do
it's like,
you, yeah.
what are we gonna do?
What's our
And
role in that? And
I think
maybe
we
that's the
have to
thing. Maybe
engage.
that's the question, is that we just at least all need to be asking ourselves, what is our role in
Yeah.
it, right? Like
Yep.
maybe it's not necessarily a blanket recommendation around how to use it or why or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's like at least have some ability to navigate what it means to be involved in whatever way, shape, or form makes
Yeah.
sense for you, but to at least not just put our head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening.
I agree with that. And I also think it's about consciously engaging. And I also think it comes down to too, like lifestyle and like what life are you choosing to live? So like for example, you talked about your friend wanting to move to Spain or to Portugal. And it's like, yeah, if I was a stay-at-home mom with 6 kids and I didn't really need to think about that because that just wasn't my life, or whatever, I'm choosing a different career path, or I'm a songwriter, or you choose a life where you can kind of get away with not engaging necessarily, but it's like I work in technology.
Yeah, yeah,
I have chosen this field. Like I have
yeah,
chosen to be fully in this camp like for this season of life, or whatever, but it's like I'm making that choice.
totally.
So then it's like, how am I, you want to talk about the environment? It's like, okay, well, we can talk about that like a lot of different ways. Like, I'm in
Yeah,
retail. Like, do we want to talk about consumerism? Like, that's a whole different conversation. So it's just like, where do we draw the line, and like, what are we willing to tolerate? But like, I really do feel like we have a responsibility to engage.
that's so interesting. Yes, I feel like, yeah, so many things for our round two of this conversation that I
Yeah.
can't
I know.
wait
I
for.
feel like we've opened a lot of like, we're really,
But I don't want to miss the opportunity, because I feel like, you've kind of been building to this question, which is, what I ask every woman on the show, and it's around legacy. And I think it's, that term can be trendy. It can also be something that feels a little heavy, but I like to think of it more as the light thing that we get to be building every day, and something that we're just intentionally building toward. And it's, not necessarily about just when we leave this version of Earth or whatever. It is, how we are showing up and what we want to be doing and the impact we want to have. And so for you, I would just love to know, what does building a legacy mean to you?
I love this question. Such a good one. I feel very strongly about being a woman, conscious, sober, leading in the corporate world. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like part of my legacy, and it's a big part of why I started Archive and like took the opportunity, was I just really felt like it was important for other women, younger women, to see women like me leading in this space.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And
Kind of
that's,
like be the example you want to see in the world.
and you're doing it. Like, how great is that?
Yeah.
How amazing does it feel, even when it's hard, but to wake up every day knowing that
Some
like
days
you're
are
moving
easier
into
than
it?
others.
I
Yes.
know, I know.
But yes. And
Sometimes
it's
I'm
like
like the pendulum.
that's why I love conversations like this too. Like,
Yeah.
and I think we talked about this the first time. It's like if one person listens and are like, "Oh, that's inspiring to me." I'm like, "Oh, yes, cool,
A
amazing."
hundred. Yes,
Like,
I know.
yeah.
I know. I think so much more about that lately too, around, for so long, especially given the like social media influencer, whatever, it's been about numbers and reach and, all these things and impressions or whatever. And I really feel like, and maybe this is just a selfish take on it, but I think we're moving more into a like, what does it actually mean to be seen in spaces that you actually care to be seen in,
Yep. The
versus like,
community piece. Yeah.
yes, and like, the impact that can be had at a smaller scale, that doesn't mean the impact is any less. And
Yep.
sometimes it's even deeper because that one person heard that one thing in your story, right? We covered a lot of ground today, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes people are like, well, what do you want me to talk about? I'm like, I don't know. We're going to talk about all kinds of things.
We're just gonna go all over and see how it turns out.
Because you just never know. Sometimes when I hear from people, like the tiny little tidbit that they got from one woman's, experience is not anything I would have expected from the story that somebody would take it from. And so you're like,
it just
who
lands
knows?
in that moment for whatever reason. And
Yes.
I think it's incredible. Yeah.
I'm so excited that I did a little cold outreach to somebody that I thought looked super cool. And
I'm a sales. I came up in sales. I'm all for the cold outreach. Like, yes.
As long as you do it with respect and not in a creepy, weird way where I get way too much of that shit in my inbox too, where I'm like, no, I don't want your whatever thing.
Yeah,
like,
same.
What are you talking about?
I know.
It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, this was so fun.
Yeah, ditto. Part 2 at some point.
Yes, anytime.
Good to see you. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.